In this video, we're going to learn how to play Asleep by the Smiths on guitar. Some things to note before we get started. The song is in 3/4. It's in the key of C, though F really does most of the talking here. It's got a swing feel to the eighth notes, so rather than playing the eighth notes like 1 and 2 and 3 and, we're going to play them like in a skipping way, like 1 to 2 to 3 to 1 to 2 to 3. For the tutorial, I'm playing it on my Gretsch just for recording purposes. I think it sounds great on a nylon string or an acoustic, but really I think whatever guitar you have available, I think it'll sound good. This is my first time making a tutorial, so please let me know in the comments how I did. I'd love to hear your feedback on how I can improve tutorials, because really I'm making them for you, so I want to make them as clear and concise as possible. So I'm going to go through each part individually. There's only 4 parts. There's the intro, the verse, the chorus, and the bridge. And there are a few variations in each part, and I'll cover them as we go through them. Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's only 4 chords, really. We got an F. We have a G, played like this, but also like this. We have an A minor, and we have a C. I love how musical the song sounds and how much of a musical journey it takes us on with really only using those 4 chords. Now, if you want to see a version of this tutorial with an on-screen tab that follows along with what I'm playing, you can find that on my Patreon. You can also find on my Patreon a tab for the full song that has the variations in the spots that they're played. All right, so let's get into the actual tutorial part. So here's the intro, played all the way through. Okay, so we start with the G chord, which is the 3rd fret of the low E with your ring finger. And then we're gonna, at the same time, play the 1st fret of the B string that's fretted with your index fingers. We'll play those 2 strings together. And then we have an open D. And then we're gonna lift our index finger so we can play the open B and the G string together. And then we're gonna go back to the the G note on the low E, 3rd fret, another open D. And then we're going to use our pinky to fret the 3rd fret of the B string. And that's the 1st bar, so altogether that sounds like this. So when you're playing that 3rd fret of the B string with your pinky, if it helps, you can lift up your ring finger just to hit that note if it's a little more comfortable. And that might actually set you up better to play the next bar, which is an A minor. We're going to fret the middle finger on the D string 2nd fret. We're going to have a ring finger on the G string 2nd fret, and then our index finger on the 1st fret of the B string. And then the sequence of the arpeggio that we're going to be playing is the open A, followed by the D string. And then we're going to play the B and the G string together. And then we're going to move to a G chord. So we're going to take our ring finger and we're going to put it back in that spot on the 3rd fret of the low E. And we're going to play that together with the open G and the B string together. Then that bar sounds like this, which leads us to the F chord. So we're going to put our index finger on the 1st fret of the low E string, and then we're going to play at the same time the open high E together. But we're also going to fret, even though we don't play it, we're going to fret our ring finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, because that'll get us ready for the next note. And then we're going to play that G string 2nd fret, and then we're going to alternate between the G string and the low E, so it sounds like this. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 1. And then for the last bar of the intro, we've already played the 1st note, which is that F on the 1st fret of the low E string. This time we're going to play the open E, or open B string, sorry. And then we're going to move our ring finger back to the 3rd fret of the low E, and then play another open B. So that bar is like 1 to 2, 3, 1 to 2, 3. We'll play it all together. It was a little sloppy there, but we'll play the intro all together again, slowly. Okay, and that leads us to the verse. So the verse starts off with the C chord. I should just mention, most of the song is you're arpeggiating chords. So you're really just holding down a chord shape with slight modifications to it and then you're just arpeggiating the notes in the chords. So you don't have to really, your left hand is just kind of chilling most of the time in the chord shapes, which is nice. So for the verse, this is what it sounds like all the way through. I'll try to capture the variations. That leads us to the chorus. Okay, so for the verse, the first time you play it in the song, it's played 3 times through with some little variations. There's one on the F chord, which you may have noticed. I'll go cover that when we get to it. And then the last bar of the verse, there's a version where you play it that leads us back to the beginning for the repeat. Then there's another version of that last bar, which transitions us to the chorus. Well, let's start at the beginning of the verse. The first chord is a C. We're going to be fretting the 3rd fret of the A string with our ring finger. And then we're going to use our index finger to bar the 2 top strings, the B and the E string. We're going to play those 3 strings together. And then we're going to lift up our index finger. So we're only fretting the 1st fret of the B string. And we're going to play that open E now together with that 1st fret of the B string. And then for this part, if barring like that is something that's new to you, what I recommend is approaching it in reverse. Start by just playing the 1st fret of the B string with the open E so you can ring out. They both ring out. And then barring your finger down, rolling it over the high E string so that they're both barred. So that way when it comes time to lifting it, you're already in the right position where you can play the next note so you don't have to readjust your finger. So those first 2 beats, again, are... And then we're going to arpeggiate that chord. So it's going to be 3rd fret of the A string. And then we're going to play that B string 1st fret. And then after that, we're going to play the B string 1st fret again, but this time with the open E with it. And this whole time, we never really lift off our finger off that B string throughout this part of the verse. So that first bar altogether sounds like this. And then the next bar is we jump right away quickly to an F by rolling our thumb over the base of the neck and fretting that 1st fret of the low E string. Now, if this is a new, different thing for you, I highly recommend playing it this way, just because it ensures that our fingers are in the right positions to play what comes next. Otherwise, it's kind of awkward. Like you could use your middle finger, but then you have to then kind of work your way with your pinky over to the 3rd fret. And you really want the strings to ring out as much as possible. So that just kind of makes it challenging not to use your thumb. So I use my thumb, and the first note of the bar is F, 1st fret, low E. And then again, we're going to play the B string 1st fret together with the open E. Back to the F note on the low E string. Then here, we're going to use our ring finger or our pinky to play the 3rd fret of the B string. And then we're going to go back to the 1st fret of the B string. See, never lifting up that index finger throughout this whole part. And then together, those 2 bars sound like this. And that leads us to the A minor chord. I think it's an A minor chord. And it's very much like the beginning of the verse, except this time we're not fretting the 3rd fret of the A string. We're actually going to play it open while barring the 2 top strings like we did. And then we're going to lift our index finger again to this time only play the open E by itself. So, and then we're going to move to a G chord by fretting the 3rd fret of the low E with our index finger. With our ring finger, we're going to fret the 4th fret of the G string. Then with our middle finger, we're going to fret the 3rd fret of the B string. And we're going to play those 3 strings together. So that bar altogether is... And the next note is that F chord. So we're going to slide down that shape, same strings, 1 step to the 1st fret. And then here's where the variation comes into play, which you may have noticed when I played through the whole verse. So here, the first time, and this is the only time we play it this way, we hold down that chord, the F chord, we let it ring out, and on the and of 3, we just play the B string 1st fret. So it's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, which is the next note and the next measure. And then the second variation, which is played for every other time we play the verse, is the same 3 strings, but we arpeggiate the full chord from bottom to top. So we play the 3 strings together, then the low E, and the E string, and then the B string. And that sounds like this. And then that leads us to the next sequence in the verse, which is almost identical to the intro, except we don't play the B string first fret on that first note. Instead, it's just the 3rd fret of the low E by itself, but everything else is the same. So I'll go through it quickly since we've already covered it. We have the 3rd fret low E, open D, and then the G string and the B open together, back to the low E, open D, put our pinky down, 3rd fret of the B string, and that moves us to the A minor, which is the open A, D string 2nd fret, and then the B string 1st fret with the G string 2nd fret played together. And we got the G chord again with the 3rd fret of the low E and then the open B and G string played together. So then it goes to the F, but I'll just quickly cover that. Maybe I'll do the transition of the F chord, the variation, so you just have a sense of how it sounds in context. So I'll start from the F beforehand. So that's the first time, and then the second time, and every other time is played like this. So that leads us back to the F chord like we played in the intro. So the 1st fret low E, open high E to get played together. Then we have a ring finger down on the 2nd fret of the G string ready to play the next note, and then we alternate between the low E and the G strings like this. 1, 2, 3, and 1. This is the last bar of the verse, which leads us to the beginning of the verse, and we play it like we played in the intro, where it's like. So the 1st fret of the low E, open B, 3rd fret of the G, low E again, and then the open B again. So it's. That leads us back to the verse. Okay, and then for the second variation, this is the transition to the chorus, and then we'll be done with the verse. So you have the F on the 1, and then you play an open G string, back to the F, then an open G string again, so it sounds like this. Now we're in the chorus. So here's the chorus all the way through, and then I'll cover the variations afterwards. So let's break down the chorus. So essentially, the chorus has 2 parts that repeat with some variations. There's the 4 bars of the G lick, and then we go to an F, the F lick, which we play twice, and then it goes back to the G lick, which we play twice, so altogether 4 times, and then the F lick again, which is played twice, altogether 4 times. There's little variations each time you encounter them, but let's start from the very beginning. So we have the G chord, which starts with the low E string 3rd fret. Then we have an open B, open G played together. Back to the low E, open D. Then we're going to put our index finger down on the 1st fret of the B string with the open G as well at the same time. Then the low E 3rd fret again. Lift that index finger to play the open B. And then we're going to play the open G, open D, open D, and then the G string again. Not the G string, the G note on the 3rd fret of the low E, and the open D again. So that's like the main idea of the chorus. One thing that's worth mentioning is when you put your index finger down on the 1st fret of the B string there, you want to hold that position while you play the low E and lift it only right before you're playing that open B after that. So it sounds like this. So you see how when I'm playing that right there, that index finger is still planted, and it's only after I play that low E 3rd fret, the G note, then when I'm ready to play that open B, I only lift it out right beforehand. Okay, so let's cover the second variation. So we played it once through, then there's a second playthrough, but a little bit of a different ending. So I'll just play it from the beginning again of the second playthrough. So it's a low E, 3rd fret, open B, open G together, low E again, 3rd fret, open D. We're going to put our index finger down on the B string again with an open E, open G played together. And then we're going to play another low E 3rd fret, lift up your finger off the B string to play an open B, open G. Here's the variation. Now we're going to play a 3rd fret, low E again, then the open D, then the low E 3rd fret again. And that transitions us into the F sequence in the chorus. So those 4 bars together sound like this. Alright, so let's play the F sequence. And it's 4 bars of F before we go back to the G riff again. And it's very similar to how we've played the F in other parts of the song already. So we have the 1st fret of the low E string played at the same time with the high E string open. But we want to make sure we have our ring finger planted on the 2nd fret of the G string so we're ready for that next note. And then we go back to the 1st fret of the low E, and then back to the G string, 2nd fret. Voice crack. And back to the F for the 1, 2, 3, and 1. And here's where we got a little different bit, and it's kind of like a whisper. You want to introduce dynamics here if you can, and play it really quietly. You can almost not even play it at all. Both sound great. But what we have is on that first beat, we have the F, which we played. And then we have 2 hits, one after the other, of the 2nd fret of the G string. And then we have another F on the low E 1st fret. So altogether, those 2 bars sound like this. And then it repeats. But this time, the 2nd bar has a variation, which is the same actually as the last bar of the verse that brought us to the chorus. And it makes sense because now we're going to go back to that G lick after this, so it transitions us like it did in the verse to the G riff. So the 1st bar is the same as what we just played. Then we go to this part, the F, then the open G, F again, open G. So those 4 bars of F all together sound like this. There's some variations for that sequence in the chorus. For the 1st and 2nd chorus, the first 2 bars are the same. However, for the 3rd chorus, there's a slight rhythm variation that sounds like this. So we have the F on the 1st fret of the low E and then the open E, and followed by the 2nd fret of the G string. And then we have the low F again. But then we have 2 hits on the 2nd fret of the G string. So that bar altogether sounds like this. But then the 2nd bar is still the same. And then, so that was the first 2 bars of the total 4. Okay, so the last 2 bars of this F sequence, there's a slight variation that's played on the 2nd and 3rd chorus that brings us back to the beginning of the chorus of that G lick. This is how it sounds. So it's pretty much the same notes, but the rhythm is a little different. If we're on the 2nd chorus, that 3rd bar is going to sound like this. And And then the next bar, the last bar of the sequence, is going to be F, first string, first fret of the low E string, open G, first fret, low E again, and then 2 hits on the open G. So that sounds like this. And then if we're in the third chorus, that third bar is going to be a little different. It's going to sound like this. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to cover all the variations. I feel like it's getting a little convoluted. But in the tab that I have available on my Patreon, I have all the variations in order. But I mean, you can play it how you like to play it. I don't think it makes much of a difference ultimately, and because they all sound good, whatever order you play them, even if you don't even include some of them. So let's just play the F sequence from the first chorus where it sounds like this. And then this is the second chorus. It's going to sound like this. And the third chorus, a little different, sounds like this. Now we're going to repeat that G part again. So it's like the same G riff essentially. And here's a second variation. So we have the third fret G, open B, open G, third fret of the low E again, open D, index finger on the first fret of the B string with the open G, and then we're gonna play the low E, third fret again, lift up the index finger to play the open D, then we're gonna play the open G, then here's the variation, we're gonna play the third fret of the low E, and then back to the open D, and we're gonna let that hang. So it sounds like this. All right, and then we're going to do another F sequence. And this time, this transitions us to the bridge, and there's 2 variations. For the first chorus, it's played almost like that first F sequence in the chorus. It's very similar, except we're just going to hang on the second bar on the first fret of the low E. So it sounds like this. And we just repeat that. So I won't go over the specific fingerings because we've already covered it. For the second and third chorus, there's a slight rhythm variation on this part, and it's the same rhythm variation we've already encountered in the F sequence in the middle of the chorus. And we're just adding that extra note in there. So it's 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3. And then that brings us to the bridge, which is the last part of the song. It's played 3 times, and the last time is an outro, which is just repeating the first 4 bars of the bridge without the transition piece that brings us back to the verse. And so here's what the bridge sounds like all together. Sorry, here's what it sounds like. Back to the verse. Okay, so this is very similar to what we've already encountered. It's that same F shape. First fret on the low E with the open high E string played together. Then we're going to play second fret of the G string, another low E first fret, and then we're going to play the second fret of the G string again. But here we're going to add our pinky on the third fret of the B string, and we're going to use that note to transition us to the next chord, which is the G in the bridge, which is the third fret low E with the open string high E played together. Then we have an open B, then another low E third fret, and then we have an open B, and then we're going to put our pinky down again on the third fret of the B string, which is going to bring us back to the F chord. So those 2 bars together sounds like this. getting ahead of myself. I just love this part of the song. It might be my favorite part. So for the third measure of the bridge, after we played those two chords, we go back to the F, like I said, and it starts off the same. We have the low E first fret, open E, and we have the second fret of the G string, another low E first fret. Then here we're gonna have our middle finger, on the first fret of the B string, and we're gonna play that, and then the second fret of the G string afterwards, and we're gonna let those two notes sustain. We're gonna hold them, let it ring out, and then we're gonna play the low E first fret again, and then we're gonna follow that with the open D string, and then we're gonna play the second fret of the G string again. And it's really important when you play the sequence that you're not muting any of the strings, especially the open D, to really sell the effect. And those two bars sound like this. So those 4 bars sound like this. And we just repeat it again to the G, but then instead of on that G chord, instead of ending it with the third fret B string, we just let that open B ring out to go back into the verse. So I'll just cover those last 2 bars. You know, it's the same thing as the first bar. Then we get to the G chord, which is the third fret, low E, open E string. Then we play the open B, and we play the third fret, low E again, and then another open B, and then we just let that note hang, and then go back to the verse. So. All right, so that's the bridge. So for the third bridge, and which is also the outro, the only difference is we're just playing those first 4 bars 4 times. And then on the 5th time, we just kind of slow it down to trail off for the ending. So it sounds like this when you repeat those first 4 bars. It sounds like this. So you play that 4 times over, and then on the last time, you just kind of, it trails out, and then that amazing music box, Auld Lang Syne outro plays over top of this bridge outro. Let me know if you want a tutorial for that part. I don't know how to play it, but I could learn it if that's something you'd be interested in playing as well. So for that last 4 bars of the song, it's just like the bridge riff played out, but it kind of trails out with a slight variation on the last 2 bars. The first 2 are the same, that we've already covered. The last 2, it's the first fret of the low E, the second fret of the G string played together, and then the open D, and then the second fret of the G string, and then the first fret of the low E played again together. So the last 4 bars sounds like... All right, that was how to play Asleep by the Smiths on guitar. Let me know what you think of the video. If it's been helpful, please, like I said, this is my first time doing a tutorial. So if you have any tips or suggestions about how I can improve my tutorials to enhance or facilitate the learning process, let me know in the comments. I hope this helps. See you later.